I still remember the sound of Jessica's laughter echoing through my living room as if it were yesterday. She stood there, arms crossed, staring at my old piano like it was some kind of joke. "This thing belongs in a landfill, Sylvia," she said, shaking her head. "I can't believe you actually made us keep it. My son Michael didn't say a word, not one." And just when I thought that was the worst part, the doorbell rang. Minutes later, a well-dressed woman stood in my doorway, tears in her eyes, whispering, "Mrs. Beaumont, you were the first person who ever believed in me." Jessica stopped laughing. "If this moment made you feel something, I'd love to hear it. Have you ever been underestimated by your own family? Tell me in the comments. And where are you watching from today? Don't forget to like and subscribe. Sometimes the quietest stories carry the deepest truths." After that moment at the door, something in the air shifted, but not in the way you might expect. People often think that when the truth is revealed, everything changes instantly. That respect comes rushing in, apologies follow, and wounds begin to heal right away. But real life doesn't work like that. Not in my house. Before Clara ever showed up at my door that day, I had already spent nearly 2 years learning how to make myself smaller. It started when I sold my home in Vermont. That house had been mine and Richard's for over 40 years. Every corner held a memory. His laughter in the kitchen, the quiet evenings we spent reading side by side, the sound of piano drifting through the halls on Sunday afternoons. After he passed, the silence in that house became unbearable. It wasn't just quiet. It was hollow. Michael insisted I move in with him. "At least for a while, Mom," he had said gently. "You shouldn't be alone." At the time, I believed him. I packed only what I could carry into that new life. A few boxes of clothes, some photographs, and the piano. The movers had complained about it. "It's old," one of them said, running a hand along the scratched wood. "You sure you don't want to just leave it?" I remember placing my hand over his and saying very quietly, "No, this one comes with me." Because that piano wasn't just furniture. It was the last place where I still felt like myself. When I first arrived at Michael's house in Connecticut, Jessica greeted me with a tight smile and a polite hug that never quite reached her eyes. "We're so happy to have you, Sylvia," she said. But her voice had edges. At first, I told myself I was imagining things. She had a beautiful home. Everything was modern, carefully curated, spotless. White countertops, glass tables, sharp lines, and soft lighting that looked like something out of a magazine. And then there was my piano, dark worn, slightly chipped at the corners. Out of place. I could see it the moment the movers brought it in. The way Jessica's expression flickered just for a second before she forced a smile again. "Oh," she said. "That's charming." That was the beginning. The comments didn't come all at once. They never do. They arrived slowly, wrapped in politeness, dressed as suggestions. Maybe we could refinish it or move it to the basement. It might be quieter down there. Have you thought about replacing it with something newer? Each sentence sounded harmless on its own. But together, they built something heavier. A quiet message. You don't belong here. Michael didn't notice at first. Or maybe he did, and he just didn't know how to respond. He was always busy, work meetings, phone calls that stretched late into the night. And Jessica noticed everything. She noticed how I still sat at the piano some mornings, even when I didn't play. How my fingers hovered over the keys like I was waiting for something that never came. She noticed and she judged. One evening, about 3 months after I moved in, she stood in the doorway while I was dusting the piano. "You know," she said casually, "we could really open up this space if we got rid of it." I froze. "It doesn't even match anything in the house," she continued. "It's kind of depressing, don't you think?" Depressing. I smiled politely because that's what I had learned to do. "It's just an old habit," I said. "I'll try to keep it out of the way." But the truth was, I didn't know how to let it go. Because letting go of that piano felt like letting go of everything I used to be. As the months passed, I began to adjust not to the house, but to the feeling of being unwanted inside it. I stopped playing entirely. At first, it was just because I didn't want to disturb anyone. Then it became something else, something deeper. I was afraid that if I touched the keys again, I would remember too much. That the music would bring back the version of myself I had already lost. So instead, I made myself useful in other ways. I cooked dinner, I folded laundry, I stayed out of the living room when Jessica had guests over. And when she introduced me, it was always the same. "This is Michael's mom. Never Sylvia. Never anything more." The worst part wasn't what she said. It was what Michael didn't say. There were moments, small ones, when I thought he might defend me. Like the time Jessica laughed about the piano during a dinner with her friends. "I swear," she said, sipping her wine, "it's like we're living in a museum." Everyone chuckled. I glanced at Michael waiting. He just smiled awkwardly and changed the subject. That was the night I stopped expecting anything from him. Loneliness inside a house full of people is a strange thing. It doesn't announce itself loudly. It seeps in quietly like a draft through a closed window. You start to question your place, your worth, your right to take up space, and little by little, you disappear. I learned the rhythm of their lives and adjusted mine around it. Jessica liked silence in the mornings, so I made sure to wake up earlier than her. Michael worked late, so I kept dinner warm and ready without asking when he'd be home. I became invisible, and the piano, it became my secret. Sometimes late at night when the house was completely still, I would sit on the bench and rest my hands on the keys. I wouldn't play. Not really. Just a note here, a chord there, soft enough that no one would hear, just enough to remind myself that I still existed, that there was still something inside me that hadn't been erased. But even that felt like it was fading, until the day Jessica laughed. Not the polite kind, not the controlled social kind. A real laugh, sharp, loud, cutting, the kind that leaves a mark. "This thing belongs in a landfill, Sylvia." And for the first time in a long time, I felt something crack inside me. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet fracture. Like something fragile finally giving way after being held together for too long. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. Because by then, I had already convinced myself she was right. That the piano was old. That I was old. That maybe we both didn't belong anymore. And then the doorbell rang. And everything I thought I knew about my life began to unravel. Long before that piano became a source of quiet shame in my son's living room, it was something entirely different. It was alive. I was younger then, barely in my 30s, living in a small town in Vermont, where winters stretched long and the world felt slower, gentler. Back then, my days had a rhythm to them. Mornings were for lessons, afternoons for practice, evenings for Richard. And the piano, it wasn't just part of my life. It was the center of it. I taught out of my home. Nothing fancy, just a modest living room with sunlight pouring through lace curtains and a well-loved upright piano that had already seen more years than I had. Most of my students came from families who could afford weekly lessons. Children in pressed clothes driven in by parents who waited in warm cars while their sons and daughters stumbled through scales and simple melodies. And then, one afternoon, she walked in. Clara Whitmore. She didn't come with a parent. She didn't even come through the front door at first. I found her standing just outside the window, peering in with wide, curious eyes, while another student was finishing their lesson. I remember pausing mid-sentence, my fingers still hovering over the keys, as I noticed her reflection in the glass. She looked fragile. Her coat was too thin for the cold sleeves, slightly too short. Her hair was pulled back in a loose, uneven ponytail, strands falling around her face, like they had been cut without much care. But her eyes, I had never seen eyes like that before. They weren't just watching. They were listening. I excused my student early that day. Something about that little girl standing outside pulled at me in a way I couldn't explain. When I stepped out onto the porch, she immediately took a step back like she had been caught doing something wrong. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean to bother you." "You're not bothering me," I replied gently. "Were you listening to the music?" She nodded, hesitant. "Yes, ma'am." There was a pause. Then, almost as if the words slipped out before she could stop them, she said, "I think I can play that." I should have smiled politely. Most children say things like that. But something in her tone, it wasn't boastful. It wasn't careless. It was certain. I studied her for a moment, then stepped aside and opened the door. "Well," I said softly, "why don't you come inside and show me?" She hesitated. "Is that okay?" "It is," I said. "What's your name?" "Clara." "Come in, Clara." She walked into my home like she didn't quite believe she was allowed to be there. Every step careful, quiet, as if she were afraid the floor might reject her. When she sat at the piano bench, her posture was stiff at first. She placed her hands on her lap, glancing at me for permission. I nodded. "Go ahead." What happened next, I still remember it as clearly as if it were yesterday. Her fingers touched the keys, and then music. Not perfect, not polished, but unmistakably real. She didn't just press the notes, she felt them. There were mistakes, of course. Notes slightly off rhythms that wavered, but underneath it all, there was something raw and undeniable. A sense of instinct. A natural understanding of the instrument that no lesson could teach. I felt my breath catch. "How did you learn to do that?" I asked quietly when she finished. She shrugged, looking down at her hands. "I just listen." That was the beginning. Clara didn't have money for lessons. She didn't even ask for them, but I offered anyway. "Come back tomorrow," I told her. "Same time." Her eyes widened. "Really?" "Yes," I said. "Really." She came back the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. At first, I told myself I was just helping a child who needed guidance, but it quickly became something more. Clara absorbed everything I taught her like she had been waiting her entire life to hear it. Scales, posture, timing. She learned them all faster than any student I had ever taught. But it wasn't just her talent. It was her silence. She rarely spoke about her life outside those lessons. When I asked about her parents, she would give short answers. When I asked where she lived, she would change the subject. But sometimes I noticed things. Bruises that didn't quite match her explanations. The way she flinched at sudden noises. The way she lingered after lessons, as if leaving meant returning to something she wasn't ready to face. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the room in gold, she stayed longer than usual. "You don't have to go yet," I told her. She shook her head. "I should," but she didn't move. Instead, she sat back down at the piano. "Can I play one more thing?" she asked. Of course. This time, she didn't try to copy anything. She just played, softly at first, then stronger. The melody unfolded in a way that felt almost like a story, something unspoken finding its way out through her fingertips. It was beautiful. But there was something else too. Something heavy. When she finished, The room fell silent. I realized my eyes were filled with tears. "That was yours, wasn't it?" I asked. She nodded slowly. "I made it up." I smiled, my voice catching. "It's one of the most honest things I've ever heard." She looked at me, then really looked at me. And for the first time, I saw something shift in her expression. Not fear, not caution, trust. "You're the only place I feel—" She paused, searching for the word. "Safe." That word stayed with me, long after she left that night, long after the house grew quiet again. I didn't know everything about Clara's life, but I knew enough to understand that those lessons meant more to her than music. And slowly, without realizing it, they began to mean more to me too. Because in teaching her, I found something I didn't even know I was missing. Purpose. Connection. A reason to keep believing that what I did mattered. I had no idea then just how much that belief would change both of our lives, or how suddenly it would all disappear. For a moment after she said it, you were the first person who ever believed in Minnow One in the room moved. It was as if time itself had paused just to let those words settle. I stared at her, trying to reconcile the little girl I once knew with the woman standing in front of me now. Her posture was confident, her coat elegant, her voice steady, but her eyes were still Clara's, and they were filled with tears. "Clara," I whispered, barely trusting my own voice. She nodded, her lips trembling into a soft smile. "It's me." Behind me, I heard Jessica shift uncomfortably. I didn't need to look at her to know what her face must have looked like. Confusion mixed with disbelief, struggling to find something logical in a moment that made none. This doesn't make any sense," Jessica said finally. "There must be some mistake." Clara turned to her, still holding my hands. "There's no mistake," she said gently. "Mrs. Beaumont taught me piano when I was a child." Jessica let out a short, awkward laugh. "I think you might be confusing her with someone else. Sylvia hasn't—" "I remember the lace curtains," Clara interrupted softly. "The way the sunlight hit the keys in the afternoon. I remember the tea you used to make, chamomile with a little too much honey." My breath caught. Details, not vague memories or polite guesses. Details. Jessica fell silent. Michael stepped forward, then his brow furrowed. "Mom, is this true?" he asked. I swallowed, my fingers tightening around Clara's. I taught a girl named Clara," I said slowly. "Years ago." Clara smiled through her tears. "You didn't just teach me," she said. "You gave me a reason to survive." I taught a girl named Clara," I said slowly. "Years ago." Clara smiled through her tears. "You didn't just teach me," she said. "You gave me a reason to survive." The room seemed to shrink around us. Jessica blinked, clearly uncomfortable now. "Okay, but what does that mean?" she asked. "I mean, people have teachers all the time. That doesn't mean it means everything," Clara said, her voice still calm, but firmer now. She turned back to me. "You probably don't remember all of it," she said gently. "But I do." And then before I could respond, she stepped fully into the house. "May I?" she asked, glancing toward the piano. Jessica hesitated for a split second, just long enough for me to notice, before forcing a tight smile. "Of course," she said. "It's still here, obviously." Clara walked toward the piano slowly, like she was approaching something sacred. Her fingers brushed the surface of the wood, tracing the small scratches, the worn edges. You kept it, she whispered. I couldn't let it go, I replied. She nodded as if that answer meant more than I realized. Then she sat down on the bench. For a moment, she didn't play. She just closed her eyes. And when her fingers finally touched the keys, the room filled with music. Not hesitant, not searching, certain, confident, beautiful. Jessica's expression changed almost instantly. The skepticism in her eyes faded, replaced by something else, something closer to shock. Michael stood frozen beside her, his mouth slightly open. I felt my chest tighten as the melody unfolded. I recognized it. Not immediately, but slowly, like a memory rising through water. It was one of Clara's first compositions, the one she had played for me on that golden evening so many years ago. But now it had grown, expanded, transformed into something far beyond what that little girl could have imagined. And yet, at its core, it was still hers. When she finished, the silence that followed was heavy. Jessica was the first to speak. That was... She hesitated, searching for the right word. Incredible. Clara turned to her politely. Thank you. Then Jessica added almost defensively. But that doesn't explain how you know Sylvia. I mean, people can say anything. I felt a flicker of embarrassment at her words, but Clara didn't seem offended. Instead, she reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. I understand, she said calmly. It's hard to believe. She tapped the screen a few times, then turned it toward Jessica. Maybe this will help. Jessica leaned in, and then her face changed. Completely. Her posture stiffened, her eyes widened, and for the first time since I had known her, she looked unsure. Michael stepped closer. What is it? He asked. Jessica didn't answer right away. She just handed him the phone. I watched as his eyes scanned the screen. Then he looked up at Clara. You're Clara Whitmore. Clara nodded. Jessica let out a quiet, disbelieving breath. Oh my God! I felt my heart skip. Who is Clara Whitmore? I asked, almost afraid of the answer. Michael turned the phone toward me. On the screen was a photograph. Clara on a grand stage, dressed in black, seated at a glossy concert grand piano. Behind her, a full orchestra. Below the image were words I had never expected to read. Clara Whitmore, international concert pianist. My fingers trembled slightly as I looked back at her. You're famous, I asked. Clara smiled softly. I suppose that's one way to put it. Jessica laughed, but this time there was no mockery in it, only disbelief. This is insane, she said. Why didn't you say that when you walked in? Clara's gaze shifted back to me. Because that's not why I came. The room fell quiet again. I came, she continued, because I've been looking for you for years. My chest tightened. For me, she nodded. I never got to say goodbye, she said, and I never got to say thank you. Jessica crossed her arms, still trying to process everything. But why now? She asked. After all this time, Clara hesitated. Just for a second. Then she looked at me again. Because there's something you deserve to know, she said softly. A strange feeling settled in my stomach. Not fear. Not exactly. Something deeper. Anticipation. What is it? I asked. Clara took a small breath. When I left Vermont, she said slowly, it wasn't by choice. I felt my pulse quicken. I was taken away, she continued, and for a long time, I thought I'd lost everything. Her voice softened. Except one thing. She glanced at the piano. You. The word hung in the air. Jessica shifted again, but she didn't interrupt this time. Even she seemed to sense that something important was unfolding. Clara stepped closer to me. You may not remember everything you did for me, she said. But I do. Her eyes filled with emotion. And what I'm about to tell you, it changed my entire life. I felt my breath catch. What do you mean? I asked. She held my gaze, her voice barely above a whisper now. You saved me, Sylvia. A pause, and you didn't even know it. The room went completely still. Because somehow I could feel it, whatever she was about to reveal next. It was going to change everything I thought I understood about the past. The silence that followed Clara's words didn't feel peaceful. It felt heavy, like something invisible had entered the room and settled between us, waiting to be acknowledged. You saved me, Sylvia, and you didn't even know it. Her voice lingered in my mind long after she said it, echoing against memories I wasn't sure I fully trusted anymore. I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Because the truth was, I didn't understand. Not yet. Jessica, however, was the first to break. Okay, hold on, she said, raising a hand slightly. Her tone tight, but controlled. I think we're all getting a little carried away here. Clara turned to her calmly. I'm not, she said. Jessica forced a polite smile, the kind she used when she was trying to regain control of a situation that had slipped too far out of her grasp. I'm sure you're not. Jessica forced a polite smile, the kind she used when she was trying to regain control of a situation that had slipped too far out of her grasp. I'm sure you're not, she replied. But you saved me. That's a pretty big statement. There it was. Doubt. Not loud, not aggressive, but unmistakable. Michael shifted beside her, clearly uncomfortable. Jess, he murmured. But Jessica shook her head slightly, not taking her eyes off Clara. No, I'm just trying to understand, she said. Because from what I can see, Sylvia taught you piano a long time ago, and that's wonderful, really, but people don't just save each other like that without knowing it. That sounds more like a story. The word story hung in the air like a quiet accusation. Clara didn't react immediately. She simply looked at Jessica, really looked at her with a kind of calm that made the tension in the room feel even sharper. You're right, she said softly. It does sound like a story. Jessica relaxed slightly, as if she had found her footing again. But it isn't one. That calm disappeared just as quickly as it came. Jessica's lips pressed together. I felt my chest tighten again, not because of what Clara was saying, but because of what I was starting to feel. A strange, uneasy pull, like standing on the edge of a memory I couldn't quite reach. I don't remember saving anyone, I said quietly. Clara turned to me immediately. I know, she said gently. Her voice softened in a way it hadn't when she spoke to Jessica. That's why I came. Michael stepped forward, running a hand through his hair. Maybe we should all just sit down, he said. This is a lot. No one argued. We moved slowly, almost cautiously, into the living room, as if sudden movements might shatter whatever fragile truth was beginning to form. Clara sat across from me. Jessica remained standing for a moment longer, before finally lowering herself onto the arm of the couch, her posture still guarded. Michael hovered between us, unsure where he belonged. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Then Jessica broke the silence again. So, she said, crossing her arms. Let's be clear. You're saying Sylvia changed your life in some major way, but she doesn't even remember doing it. Clara nodded. Yes. Jessica tilted her head slightly. And you expect us to just accept that? Clara didn't hesitate. I'm not asking you to accept anything, she said. I'm telling you what she said. I'm telling you what happened. There was no arrogance in her tone, no need to convince, just certainty. Jessica exhaled sharply through her nose, clearly frustrated. This is unbelievable, she muttered. Michael shot her a warning look. Jess. What happened? There was no arrogance in her tone, no need to convince, just certainty. Jessica exhaled sharply through her nose, clearly frustrated. This is unbelievable, she muttered. Michael shot her a warning look. Jess. What? She snapped quietly. I'm just being realistic. Then she turned back to Clara. Look, I'm not saying you're lying. I'm just saying people exaggerate things over time. Memories change. Feelings get bigger than they actually were. Her eyes flicked toward me for a brief moment. Especially when someone's older. The word landed harder than she probably intended. Or maybe exactly as hard as she intended. I felt it settle into my chest, like a weight I had been carrying for far too long. Clara noticed. Of course she did. Her expression changed not into anger, but something quieter. Something protective. You think this is about exaggeration? She asked softly. Jessica shrugged. I think it's about perspective. Clara leaned forward slightly. Then let me give you mine. The room stilled again. Even Jessica didn't interrupt this time. Where I grew up. Clara began, her voice steady but low. There wasn't much kindness. Something in the way she said it made my stomach tighten. Not dramatic, not emotional, just factual. My father died when I was very young, she continued. My mother remarried, and after that, things changed. I felt my fingers curl slightly in my lap. Memories, faint, scattered pieces, the way Clara used to flinch at sudden sounds, the way she avoided certain questions. I had noticed, but I hadn't known. My stepmother didn't believe in things like music, Clara said, or dreams, or anything that didn't serve a purpose she could see. Jessica shifted slightly, but said nothing. Coming to your house, Clara said, looking at me again, was the only time I felt like I could breathe. My throat tightened. You never asked too many questions, she continued. You didn't push. You didn't judge. Her voice softened. You just listened. A silence followed that felt different from the others, heavier, more real. Jessica uncrossed her arms slightly, though she didn't seem to realize she had. Michael stood completely still now, his earlier uncertainty replaced by something closer to focus. And then one day, Clara paused. For the first time since she started speaking, her voice wavered. I was gone. I felt my heart skip. I remember that I whispered. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Clara's eyes widened slightly. You do just the feeling, I said. You stopped coming. No explanation, no goodbye. Clara nodded slowly. I didn't get one either. The air shifted again. Jessica leaned forward now despite herself. What happened? She asked quietly. Clara hesitated. Not long, but long enough for something to build. They took me away, she said. The words landed softly, but their weight was unmistakable. Michael frowned, Who did Clara looked down for a moment? Social services, she said. Someone had reported what was happening in my house. A strange sensation washed over me. Recognition, faint, uncertain. But there. I thought I'd never see that piano again, Clara continued. Never hear music again. Never feel safe again. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. But I was wrong. Jessica leaned in further now, her earlier skepticism slowly unraveling. Why, she asked. Clara lifted her gaze, and this time when she looked at me, there was something deeper there. Something that made my chest tighten with anticipation. Because of something you did, she said. I shook my head slightly. I don't remember. I know, she interrupted gently. Then she took a slow breath. And that's the part you need to hear. The room fell completely silent, because whatever came next was no longer just about the past. It was about the truth I had somehow lived without ever knowing it. Clara didn't rush. She didn't dramatize her words or raise her voice, and somehow that made everything she said feel even heavier. After I was taken away, she began, her hands folded tightly in her lap. I didn't understand what was happening at first. Her gaze drifted slightly not away from us, but somewhere deeper, somewhere far beyond the walls of that living room. I remember being in the back of a car, she continued. Two people I didn't know sitting in the front. They kept speaking gently, telling me everything was going to be okay. She gave a faint, almost bitter smile. But when you're a child and everything you've ever known disappears in a single day, okay doesn't mean anything. I felt a quiet ache settle in my chest because I could see it now. Not clearly, but enough. The fear she must have carried. The confusion. They took me to a temporary home first, Clara said. A place where children stayed until they were placed somewhere else. Jessica shifted slightly, her earlier sharpness gone, now replaced by something more subdued. What was it like? She asked almost without thinking. Clara paused. Loud, she said. That single word hung in the air. Too many voices. Too many rules. Too many people who didn't know each other, trying to pretend they belonged in the same space. She exhaled slowly. And no music. Something about the way she said that last part made my throat tighten. No music, I repeated softly. Clara shook her head. No instruments? No lessons? Nothing. Her fingers curled slightly as if remembering the absence of something they once knew intimately. It felt like someone had to ken away the only language I understood. Her fingers curled slightly as if remembering the absence of something they once knew intimately. It felt like someone had taintimately. It felt like someone had to ken away the only language I understood, she said. I felt my hands tremble slightly in my lap, because I knew that feeling more than I wanted to admit. I tried to remember the pieces you taught me. Ken away, the only language I understood, she said. I felt my hands tremble slightly in my lap, because I knew that feeling more than I wanted to admit. I tried to remember the pieces you taught me, Clara continued. I would sit on the edge of my bed at night and move my fingers in the air like I was still playing. Her voice softened. But it wasn't the same. A silence followed, not uncomfortable, just full. Michael leaned forward slightly, his voice quieter now. How long were you there? Clara shrugged faintly. long enough to start forgetting what it felt like to be myself. The words struck deeper than anything she had said so far. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Jessica very carefully asked, "And then what happened?" Clara lifted her gaze again. "I was moved," she said. "To a foster home?" There was a subtle shift in her tone, not relief, but something close. "It wasn't perfect," she added. "But it was quieter, safer." She hesitated. "And one day everything changed. I felt my pulse quicken. Not from fear, from something else. Recognition, maybe? Or the beginning of it." "They called me into the office," Clara said. One of the counselors handed me an envelope. Her voice grew softer. "I thought it was just paperwork. Something about my placement." She swallowed. "But when I opened it..." She paused, and for the first time since she started telling this story, her composure cracked. Just slightly. "There was a letter," she said. My breath caught. "A letter," I repeated. Clara nodded slowly. "Yes." She reached into her purse again, more deliberately this time, and pulled out something folded, carefully preserved edges worn but protected. My heart began to pound. "I've carried this with me for years," she said. Jessica leaned forward instinctively. Michael stepped closer. "And I couldn't move." Clara unfolded the paper gently, like it was something fragile enough to break. "I've read it so many times," she said. "I practically have it memorized." She looked up at me. "But I think you should hear it the way I did." My chest tightened. "Clara," I whispered. She nodded, and then she began to read. "To whom it may concern," she said softly, her voice steady, despite the emotion underneath. "I am writing regarding a student of mine, Clara Whitmore." The world seemed to tilt. My fingers gripped the edge of my chair. Clara is an exceptional child, not only in talent, but in resilience. She possesses a natural gift for music that cannot be taught, only nurtured. I felt something stir deep inside me, something old, something buried. I have reason to believe that her current environment is not conducive to her well-being or development. I strongly urge that her situation be reviewed and that she be given access to opportunities that will allow her to grow. My breath became shallow. The words felt familiar. Too familiar. This child has the potential to become something extraordinary, Clara continued. But more importantly, she deserves a chance to feel safe. Tears blurred my vision. "No, it couldn't be. If there is anything I can do to support her education or placement, I am willing." Clara's voice softened even more. "Sincerely, Sylvia Beaumont." The room fell completely silent. I couldn't breathe, because suddenly I remembered. Not all at once, not clearly, but enough. Fragments. A late night at the kitchen table. Richard sitting beside me, urging me to write something, anything. The way my hands had shaken as I tried to find the right words. The feeling that I needed to do something, even if I didn't know if it would matter. I wrote that. I whispered. Clara nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks now. "Yes," she said. Jessica stared at me stunned. "You never told us that," she said. "I didn't remember," I replied, my voice trembling. "Not until now." Michael looked between us, his expression filled with something I hadn't seen in a long time. "Respect." "Wait," he said slowly. "So that letter, it's why they took her out of that house." Clara shook her head gently. "It was part of it," she said. "There were other reports, other concerns. She looked at me again. But your letter made them listen. A tear slipped down my cheek before I could stop it. I didn't know I whispered. I know, she said softly. But it didn't stop there. The room held its breath again. Because somehow we all understood now. The letter was only the beginning. What do you mean? Jessica asked quietly. Clara folded the paper carefully, holding it close for a moment before placing it back in her bag. That letter didn't just help get me out, she said. It opened a door. My heart pounded. A door to what? Michael asked. Clara's lips curved into a small emotional smile. To a life I never would have had otherwise. She looked at me, really looked at me. And that's the part you don't remember at all. A chill ran through me, because I could feel it now. Whatever came next was bigger than I had ever imagined. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until my chest began to ache. Clara's words, "That's the part you don't remember at all," echoed through me like something trying to unlock a door I didn't even know existed. What else did I do? I asked, my voice quieter now, almost fragile. Clara studied me for a moment, not with judgment, not with expectation, but with a kind of patience that made me feel both comforted and exposed. You didn't just write that letter, she said. My heart skipped. You acted on it. A flicker of something distant moved through my memory. I don't understand, I admitted. Clara gave a small nod, as if she had expected that. After I was placed in foster care, she continued, the people there didn't really know what to do with me. Her tone was calm, but there was an undercurrent of something deeper, something hard-earned. They knew I was different, she said. Not in a bad way, just not like the other kids. Michael leaned forward slightly. What do you mean? Clara shrugged faintly. I didn't connect the same way. I didn't talk much. I didn't play the way they did. She paused, but I listened. My chest tightened again, because that had always been her gift. And one of the counselors, Clara went on, noticed that I kept tapping my fingers against surfaces, tables, walls, even my own knees. A faint, almost nostalgic smile crossed her face. She asked me why I did that, and I told her. Clara glanced at me. Because I didn't have a piano anymore. I felt something inside me shift. A memory not clear, not whole, but present. A conversation. A phone call. Late evening. Richard standing nearby watching me pace. They contacted you, Clara said softly. My head lifted slightly. They did. She nodded. Yes. The counselor found your letter in my file, and she reached out to you. The room seemed to blur at the edges. I remember something like that, I said slowly. A call, someone asking about you. Clara's expression softened. You sounded so worried, she said, even though we hadn't seen each other in weeks. My throat tightened. I didn't know where you were, I whispered. You just disappeared. I know, she said gently, but you didn't let that be the end of it. Jessica leaned forward now, completely silent, her earlier skepticism gone without a trace. What did she do? She asked quietly. Clara turned slightly toward her. She insisted on seeing me. The words landed like a stone dropped into still water. What I breathed. Clara nodded again. You drove all the way to the foster home, she said, even though it was hours away. My hands trembled. I didn't remember the drive. I didn't remember the road. But I remembered the feeling, urgency, fear, the need to make sure she was okay. I brought something with me, I said slowly, the memory forming piece by piece. Clara smiled through her tears. Yes, a keyboard, I whispered. Her smile widened. A small one, she said. Portable, worn at the edges. Richard. He had insisted we could afford it, even when I said we couldn't. I closed my eyes briefly as the memory sharpened. I didn't want you to forget, I said, my voice barely audible. Clara's expression broke completely then. I didn't, she said. I never did. Silence wrapped around us again, but this time it felt different. Full. Alive. You didn't just bring me that keyboard? Clara continued after a moment. You sat with me. Her voice softened further. You asked me to play. A tear slipped down my cheek. I remember now, I said. And this time, I truly did. The room, small, plain. Clara sitting on a chair that was too big for her feet barely touching the floor. Her hands hovering over the keys like she was afraid they might disappear. You were so quiet, I said. Clara nodded. I didn't think I was allowed to be anything else. The words hit harder than anything before them. And then you told me something, she added. I searched my memory. What did I say? Clara stepped closer. You said, no one gets to take music away from you. Not as long as you're still breathing. The sentence echoed through breathing. The sentence echoed through me. I felt it settle deep in my chest, like something I had once believed with my whole heart. I said that, I whispered. Clara smiled through her tears. You did. Jessica let out a soft, disbelieving breath. Oh my God, me. I felt it settle deep in my chest, like something I had once believed with my whole heart. I said that, I whispered. Clara smiled through her tears. You did. Jessica let out a soft, disbelieving breath. Oh my God, Michael didn't speak, but I could feel his eyes on me, seeing me differently. Maybe for the first time in years. That visit, Clara continued, changed everything. How Jessica asked, her voice no longer sharp, but almost careful. Clara turned slightly toward her. Because you didn't stop there, she said. She looked back at me. You contacted a music academy. My heart skipped again. Boston. A letter. An application. I sent them a recording, I said slowly. Clara nodded. Yes, I remembered now. Late night, sitting beside the piano recording Clara's playing on an old tape recorder. Listening back. Choosing the best one. Hoping desperately that someone would hear what I heard. I didn't tell you? Sitting beside the piano recording Clara's playing on an old tape recorder. Listening back. Choosing the best one. Hoping desperately that someone would hear what I heard. I didn't tell you, I said. Clara shook her head. No, you didn't. Why not? Jessica asked. I answered before Clara could. Because I didn't want to give her hope if nothing came of it. My voice cracked slightly. I didn't want her to be disappointed. Clara stepped even closer. But something did come of it, she said. I looked up at her. What happened? I asked, though part of me already knew. Her eyes shone. They listened. The room seemed to hold its breath again. They invited me to audition, she continued. The foster family took me. I was terrified. I could picture it, too clearly. But I remembered what you said. Clara added. I felt my chest tighten. No one gets to take music away from you. She nodded. So I played. A tear slipped down her cheek. And they offered me a scholarship. Jessica covered her mouth. Michael exhaled slowly. And I couldn't speak. Because the weight of it finally settled. Not just the letter. Not just the visit. Not just the keyboard. Everything. Every small thing I had done had built something far bigger than I ever imagined. You changed the direction of my life, Clara said softly. My eyes filled with tears. I didn't know I whispered. I know, she replied, and then she reached for my hands again. But that doesn't make it any less real. I looked at her, really looked at her, not as the child I once taught, but as the woman she had become. Strong, resilient, extraordinary. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen. Something inside me broke open after Clara finished speaking. Not loudly, not in a way anyone else could hear, but I felt it deep in my chest, like a door I had kept locked for years had finally been forced open. Because now I remembered, not just the letter, not just the visit, everything. And with those memories came something I had spent a long time trying to bury. Pain. I stopped playing after that, I said suddenly. My voice surprised even me. Clara's eyes softened immediately. I know, she said gently. Jessica frowned slightly. Wait, what do you mean? She asked. You had a piano this whole time. I shook my head slowly. Having a piano isn't the same as playing it. The room fell quiet again, because there was something in my tone now that hadn't been there before. Something heavier, more honest. I used to play every day. I continued, my eyes drifting toward the piano across the room. Before Clara. During Clara. After Clara, I swallowed. Until one day, I didn't. Michael shifted. Mom, why? I hesitated. Because this was the part I didn't like to remember. The part I had convinced myself didn't matter anymore. But Clara was standing here, living proof that it did. Richard got sick, I said quietly. The name felt fragile on my tongue, like something I hadn't said out loud in too long. Jessica lowered her gaze slightly. Michael went completely still. It happened fast, I continued. At least it felt fast. In reality, it had taken months. Long, exhausting months that blurred together in a haze of hospital visits, quiet conversations, and the slow, painful realization that there were things I couldn't fix. I kept teaching at first, I said. I told myself I needed to, that the routine would help. I gave a small, bitter smile. But I was lying to myself. Clara didn't interrupt. She didn't need to. I remember sitting at the piano one evening. I said, my voice trembling slightly, trying to practice. And I couldn't feel anything. The memory hit me harder than I expected. The notes were still there. The music was still correct. But it was empty. I closed my eyes briefly, like something inside me had gone quiet. Jessica shifted again, but this time there was no impatience in her movement, only discomfort, and maybe guilt. Richard used to sit beside me when I played, I continued, even when he was tired, even when he could barely keep his eyes open. A tear slipped down my cheek. He said it helped him forget the pain. My voice broke, and then, one night, He asked me to play for him. The room felt smaller now, closer, like everyone was leaning in without realizing it. I whispered. God, I tried. But the memory refused to soften. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I kept missing notes. I couldn't focus. I pressed my fingers together tightly, and he just watched me. Clara took a small step closer. What happened? She asked gently. I let out a slow, unsteady breath. He reached over and placed his hand on mine. I said, and he told me it was okay. A pause, then quieter. He said, I didn't have to play for him anymore. That sentence still hurt, even after all these years. Why would he say that? Michael asked softly. I shook my head. I don't think he meant it the way I heard it, I said. But in that moment, my voice cracked. It felt like I had failed him. Silence. Heavy. Unforgiving. So I stopped, I said simply. Jessica's eyes widened slightly. You just stopped? I nodded. At first, I told myself it was temporary, that I would go back to it when things got better. I let out a quiet, hollow laugh. But things didn't get better. The words hung in the air. Because we all knew what came next. He passed away a few weeks later, I said. No one spoke. No one needed to. And after that, I continued. The piano didn't feel like music anymore. My gaze drifted toward it again. It felt like a reminder of everything I had lost, of everything I couldn't fix. I didn't touch it for months, I said. Then months turned into years. Clara's voice came softly. But you kept it. I nodded. Yes. Why Jessica asked, her tone quieter now, almost uncertain. I looked at her, really looked at her, because letting it go would have meant letting go of everything I used to be. I said. She didn't respond. Not this time. And when I moved here, I added, glancing briefly around the room, I thought maybe I would start again. A faint, sad smile crossed my lips. But I didn't. Jessica lowered her eyes, and for the first time since I had known her, she looked ashamed. I'm sorry, she said quietly. The words were so soft I almost didn't hear them. I blinked. What? She hesitated. I didn't know, she said. About any of this? Her voice wavered slightly. I thought it was just an old piece of furniture, something you were holding on to for no reason. I studied her face, really studied it, and I saw something new, not judgment, not irritation, understanding, or at least the beginning of it. It's all right, I said gently, but Clara shook her head. No, she said firmly. It's not. The room stilled again, because there was something in her tone now that carried weight. Purpose. You didn't just keep that piano, Clara continued, looking at me. You carried everything that came with it. She turned to Jessica. And you laughed at it. Jessica flinched. Clara's voice didn't rise, but it didn't soften either. That piano is the reason I'm standing here today, she said, and you almost convinced her it was worthless. The words hit harder than anything that had been said so far. Because they were true. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. I didn't mean, I know. Clara interrupted gently this time. But meaning something and understanding it are not the same. Jessica swallowed. Slowly. I see that now, she whispered. Silence followed. But it wasn't heavy anymore. Not in the same way. It felt like something had shifted. Like truth had finally settled into the space where doubt used to be. Clara turned back to me. You stopped playing because you thought you had lost something, she said softly. I nodded. I did? She shook her head. No, she said. Her voice was steady, certain. You didn't lose it. I felt my breath catch. It's still there, she continued. You just buried it. A pause. And I think it's time you found it again. My heart pounded, because part of me wanted to believe her, and another part was terrified to try. Clara's words stayed with me long after she said them. It's still there. You just buried it. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But wanting something and trusting it were two very different things. I don't think I can, I said finally. The words came out quieter than I expected, but they felt heavy like something I had been holding back for years. Clara didn't react immediately. She didn't argue. She didn't try to convince me. She just looked at me. Why not? She asked softly. I let out a slow breath, my eyes drifting toward the piano again. Because that was where the truth lived. Not in words, not in memories, but in that space between the keys and my hands. Because I tried once, I said. After Richard passed. My voice felt distant, like I was listening to someone else speak. I sat down at that piano, and I couldn't play. Jessica shifted slightly, but she stayed silent. Michael leaned forward, listening carefully. It wasn't just that I was rusty, I continued. It was like my hands didn't belong to me anymore. I flexed my fingers unconsciously as I spoke. They didn't remember what they used to know. Clara shook her head gently. They do, she said. I gave a small, sad smile. You didn't see it, I replied. I was terrible. That's not the same as being lost, she said. Her voice was calm, steady, certain. It felt lost, I whispered. A silence settled between us again, but this one felt fragile, like something that could either break or heal. I think you're afraid, Clara said after a moment. Her words weren't sharp. They didn't accuse, but they landed with quiet precision. I didn't answer right away, because she wasn't wrong. I am, I admitted. The room seemed to shift slightly, not because of what I said, but because I had said it out loud. For years, that piano reminded me of everything I couldn't fix. I continued. Everything I lost. My voice trembled. And if I sit down and try again, and it's not there. I stopped, because I couldn't finish the sentence. Clara stepped closer. And if it is? She asked. I looked up at her. Her eyes weren't filled with doubt or pity. They were filled with belief. The same belief I had once given her. And suddenly, that realization hit me harder than anything else. You're asking me to take that risk, I said quietly. She nodded. Yes. Jessica finally spoke, her voice softer than I had ever heard it. Maybe she doesn't have to do it right now, she said carefully. I mean, this is a lot, everything that's come up today. Clara turned to her. I'm not asking her to perform, she said. I'm asking her to remember who she is. Jessica fell silent, because there was no easy response to that. Clara looked back at me. You spent your whole life helping other people find their voice, she said. You helped me find mine. Her voice softened. Don't you think you deserve the same? My chest tightened. Because I didn't have an answer. Not a good one. Not one that felt true. I don't even know where to start, I admitted. Clara smiled gently. Start small, she said. She turned slightly and walked toward the piano again. Each step felt deliberate, careful, like she understood exactly what this moment meant. She sat down on the bench, but she didn't play. Instead, she looked back at me. Come here, she said softly. My heart began to pound. Because suddenly, this wasn't just a conversation anymore. This was real. I hesitated. Jessica watched me, her expression uncertain. Michael gave me a small nod, encouraging but not pushing. And Clara just waited, patient, steady, like she always had been. I stood up slowly. Every step toward that piano felt heavier than the last. Not because of the distance, but because of everything attached to it. Memories, loss, fear, hope. I stopped just beside her. Up close, the piano looked exactly the same. The worn edges, the slight discoloration of the keys, the tiny imperfections that had never mattered before. But now they felt like evidence of time, of everything I had avoided. I don't know if I can do this, I whispered. Clara looked up at me. You already are, she said. She slid slightly to the side on the bench, making space. An invitation, not a demand. I hesitated for one more second. Then I sat down. The moment my body touched that bench, something shifted. Not dramatically, not all at once, but enough. Enough for me to feel it. My hands rested in my lap. Still. Uncertain. Clara didn't rush me. Just place your hands on the keys, she said gently. That's all. I swallowed. Slowly, carefully, I lifted my hands. They hovered above the piano for a moment, and then they touched. The keys felt familiar. Too familiar. Like something I had been trying to forget but never truly could. My fingers trembled slightly. It's okay, Clara murmured. Don't think about playing. I closed my eyes. Then what should I think about? I asked. Her answer came softly. Nothing. A breath. Just listen. I let out a slow, unsteady breath, and then I pressed a single key. The sound filled the room. Simple, clear, alive. My chest tightened. I pressed another, then another. The notes weren't connected. They weren't part of anything. But they were there. Real. I don't know what I'm doing, I said. Clara smiled. Yes, you do. I shook my head. No, Stop trying to be who you were, she said gently. I paused. Just be who you are now. The words settled into me, slowly, carefully, and for the first time in years, I let go of the expectation, of perfection, of memory, of everything I thought I had to be. And I played. Not well, not smoothly, but honestly. The notes came out uneven, hesitant, but they came. And with each one, of memory, of everything I thought I had to be. And I played. Not well, not smoothly, but honestly. The notes came out uneven, hesitant, but they came. And with each one, something inside me shifted. Not all at once, but enough. Enough for me to feel it. Enough for me to believe maybe Clara was right. Maybe it was never gone. Maybe it was just waiting. At first, the notes didn't belong together. They came out uneven, hesitant, uncertain, like fragments of a language I used to speak fluently, but had long since forgotten. But I didn't stop. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't trying to be perfect. I was just trying to feel. My fingers pressed another key, then another. A pattern began to form, not intentional, not structured, but something real, something alive. I could feel it building slowly, quietly, like a heartbeat returning after being gone for far too long. "Keep going," Clara whispered beside me. Her voice was steady, grounding. I didn't open my eyes. I didn't want to lose whatever this was. My hands moved again. This time, the notes came a little easier, still fragile, still uncertain, but no longer empty. And then something shifted. Not in my hands, not in the piano, in me. A memory. Not the painful ones, not the hospital rooms, or the silence that followed Richard's absence. Something else. Warmer. Lighter. I saw sunlight, golden and soft, pouring through lace curtains. A younger version of myself sitting exactly where I was now. Clara, small, quiet. Clara watching me with wide, attentive eyes. "Try it again," I had said to her once. Not perfectly, just honestly. My breath caught, because those words, they weren't just for her. They had never been just for her. My fingers pressed down harder this time. The sound filled the room stronger now, fuller. And suddenly, the notes connected. Not by memory, not by practice, but by feeling. A melody began to emerge, familiar, but not exactly the same. Something old reshaped by everything I had lived through since. I opened my eyes. Clara was watching me, not with excitement, not with surprise, but with quiet understanding. Like she had been waiting for this moment all along. Jessica stood a few feet away, her hands clasped tightly together. Her eyes were fixed on me wide and unblinking. Michael didn't move at all. He just stood there, completely still, as if he didn't want to disturb what was happening. I turned back to the piano, and this time, I didn't hesitate. I let myself play. The melody grew, stronger, more certain. The hesitation faded, replaced by something deeper. Something I hadn't felt in years. Connection. My hands moved more freely now, gliding across the keys in a way that felt both unfamiliar and completely natural at the same time. I wasn't thinking. I wasn't remembering. I was being. And then the emotion hit. All at once, it surged through me like a wave I had been holding back for far too long. Grief. Love. Loss. Hope. Every note carried something I had never said out loud. Every chord held something I had buried. My vision blurred as tears filled my eyes. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. Because stopping now would mean losing it again. And I wasn't ready for that. Not anymore. The music filled the room. Not perfect, not polished, but real. So painfully, beautifully real. And then I felt it, something I hadn't felt since before Richard got sick. Peace. Not complete, not permanent, but enough. Enough to remind me that it was still possible. My hands slowed. The final notes lingered in the air, soft and trembling. And then silence. But it wasn't empty. It was full. Alive. Breathing. I sat there for a moment, my hands still resting on the keys, my chest rising and falling as I tried to steady myself. I couldn't finish the sentence because I didn't know what to say. Clara's voice came gently beside me. You found it. I shook my head slightly, tears slipping down my cheeks. No. I whispered. It found me. A quiet sound broke through the silence. I turned slightly. Jessica. She was crying. Not quietly, not politely, but openly, like something inside her had finally given way. I'm so sorry, she said, her voice shaking. I frowned, slightly confused. For what? For everything she said. For the way I spoke to you. For laughing at the piano. For not seeing you. Her words hit me harder than I expected. Because they weren't defensive. They weren't careful. They were honest. I thought you were just holding on to the past, she continued. Something that didn't matter anymore. She wiped at her tears, shaking her head. But this is who you are. The room went still again. But this time, it wasn't tense. It wasn't uncertain. It was clear. Michael stepped forward slowly. Mom, he said quietly. I looked at him, and for the first time in years, I saw something in his expression that made my chest tighten. Pride. I didn't know, he said, about any of this. I gave a small, tired smile. I didn't either. He let out a soft breath, almost a laugh. That was, he hesitated, searching for the right word. Incredible. I shook my head slightly. It wasn't perfect. That's not the point, Clara said gently. She stood up from the bench and stepped in front of me. The point is, you felt it again. I looked at her, and she was right. For the first time in years, I had felt something that wasn't just memory. It was present, alive. You didn't lose your music, Sylvia, she continued softly. You just lost your way back to it. A tear slipped down my cheek. And now? I asked. She smiled. Now you found the door again. Jessica stepped closer, hesitating for a moment before speaking. Can I say something? Clara nodded. Jessica looked at me, her expression still emotional, but steadier now. I think you should play again. I blinked. What? Jessica stepped closer, hesitating for a moment before speaking. Can I say something? Clara nodded. Jessica looked at me, her expression still emotional, but steadier now. I think you should play again. I blinked. What? She swallowed. I mean, not just here, not just for us. Her voice trembled slightly. For people. I stared at her. Because of all the things I expected her to say, that wasn't one of them. I don't know about that, I said quickly, but Clara tilted her head slightly, studying me. Why not, she asked. I let out a small, nervous laugh. Because I haven't played in years, because I'm not that person anymore. But Clara tilted her head slightly, studying me. Why not, she asked. I let out a small, nervous laugh. Because I haven't played in years. Because I'm not that person anymore. Clara didn't respond right away. Instead, she glanced at the piano, then back at me. You just were, she said. The words settled into me, slowly, carefully, and for the first time, the idea didn't feel impossible. It felt terrifying, but possible. And sometimes, that was enough. I didn't realize how quiet the room had become. Not just silent, but expectant. Like something was about to happen. Something none of us could take back. Jessica's words still lingered in the air. You should play again for people. For people. The idea alone made my chest tighten. I don't think you understand what you're asking, I said, slowly looking at her. Jessica hesitated, but she didn't back down this time. I think I'm starting to, she replied. There was something different in her voice now. Not defensive, not dismissive, honest. Clara stepped forward slightly, her presence calm but purposeful. She's right, she said. I turned to her immediately. Clara, but she didn't let me finish. You don't just have something beautiful. She continued. You have something that matters. Her words landed deeper than I expected. People need that, she added. I shook my head instinctively. No, Clara, you don't understand. I understand exactly, she interrupted gently. Her voice didn't rise, but it carried weight. Because I'm one of those people. The room stilled again. And just like that, my argument disappeared. Clara took another step closer. You think this is about talent, she said softly. It's not. She held my gaze. It's about truth. A breath. And the truth is what you just did? She gestured slightly toward the piano. That wasn't just music. My throat tightened. That was everything you've been carrying for years. I didn't respond. Because I couldn't. Because she was right. Jessica spoke. Because she was right. Jessica spoke again, quieter this time. I've never heard anything like that, she said. I glanced at her. Her eyes were still red, but steady now. It didn't feel like a performance. She continued. It felt like a story. Again, quieter this time. I've never heard anything like that, she said. I glanced at her. Her eyes were still red, but steady now. It didn't feel like a performance, she continued. It felt like a story. Michael nodded slightly. Yeah, he said. It felt real. I let out a slow breath. That's exactly why I can't do it, I said. They all looked at me. Because it's too real, I continued. Because I don't know if I can hold that together in front of other people. Clara didn't respond right away. Instead, she studied me carefully, thoughtfully. And then she said something that made my heart stop. What if you didn't have to do it alone? I frowned slightly. What do you mean? She took a small breath. There's a concert, she said. Jessica blinked. A concert? Michael looked confused. What kind of concert? Clara's expression shifted just slightly. Not nervous, not uncertain, but intentional. The one I'm performing in tomorrow night? She said. The words landed like a sudden drop. The air left my lungs. Tomorrow, I repeated. Clara nodded. Yes. I shook my head immediately. No. No, Clara, that's not. I want you to play with me. Everything stopped. Not just the room, not just the conversation. Everything. Jessica's eyes widened. Michael stepped forward, what he said almost under his breath. I stared at Clara, certain I had misunderstood. What I want you to come with me, she said, her voice steady, and play. I let out a short, disbelieving laugh. No. The answer came too fast, too automatic. Clara didn't flinch. Why not? Because I just played my first notes in years 10 minutes ago, I said, my voice rising slightly. Because I'm not prepared. Because I can't just walk onto a stage and, "You don't need to be perfect," she said. "That's easy for you to say." I snapped more sharply than I intended. The room froze, because that wasn't who I was. Not anymore. Not with her. Clara didn't react with anger. She didn't step back. She stepped closer. "You taught me that," she said quietly. The words hit harder than anything else. I swallowed. "That's different." "No," she said. "It's not." Her voice softened, but her certainty didn't. "You're afraid." I exhaled sharply. "Of course I am." She nodded. "So was I." A pause. Every single time I stepped onto a stage, I blinked. "But you still did it." "Yes," she said. "Because of you." The room seemed to tilt again. "I carried your words with me," she continued. "Every performance, every audition, every moment I thought I wasn't good enough." She stepped even closer. "You don't get to walk away from that now." Jessica whispered almost to herself. Oh my God, Michael didn't speak at all. He just watched. And I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Cornered, not by pressure, but by truth. "I can't do this tomorrow," I said, my voice quieter now. Clara held my gaze. Then when I didn't answer, because there was no good answer, no right time, no safe moment. There never had been. Clara nodded slowly, as if she had expected that. "Then let me ask you something else," she said. "What?" Her voice softened. "If you don't do this now, will you ever?" The question settled into the room like a weight. Because it wasn't rhetorical. It wasn't dramatic. It was real. I looked at the piano, at my hands, at everything I had just felt, just rediscovered. And I knew the answer, even if I didn't want to say it out loud. Clara took one more step closer. "You gave me a chance when I didn't even know how to ask for one," she said. Her eyes filled with emotion, but her voice remained steady. "I'm asking you now." Silence. Long. Heavy. Unavoidable. Jessica whispered. "Sylvia." Michael added quietly. "Mom, you don't have to be perfect." I closed my eyes, because suddenly it wasn't about fear anymore. It was about choice. Stay where I had been for years, safe, hidden, quiet, or step forward, uncertain, terrified, alive. I opened my eyes slowly and looked at Clara. "If I say yes," I whispered, "you're not going to let me back out, are you?" A small smile touched her lips. "No," I let out a breath that felt like it had been waiting years to escape. "Then I need you to promise me something, anything." I held her gaze. "You don't leave my side." Her expression softened completely. "I never did," she said. And for the first time, I felt it. Not confidence, not certainty, but something just as powerful. Courage. "I'll do it," I said. The words barely left my mouth before the weight of them hit me, but it was done, and somehow there was no turning back. The moment I said yes, everything changed. Not in a dramatic, visible way. No one cheered, no one clapped. But the air itself felt different, charged, fragile, like we were all standing at the edge of something that could either transform me or break me. "Tomorrow night," I repeated softly, as if saying it out loud might make it less real. Clara nodded. "I'll take care of everything," she said. "You just need to be there." Just need to be there? I almost laughed, because for her, That might have sounded simple. For me, it felt like standing at the bottom of a mountain I didn't know how to climb. I need to practice, I said suddenly. The urgency in my voice surprised even me. Clara smiled slightly. Good, she said. That means you're taking it seriously. Jessica stepped forward immediately. I can help, she said. I looked at her a little startled. With what? Anything, she replied quickly. Getting things ready, helping you rehearse, making sure you have everything you need. There was no hesitation in her tone. No trace of the woman who had laughed at the piano just hours ago. This was someone else. Or maybe this was who she had always been underneath everything else. Why? I asked quietly. The question slipped out before I could stop it. Jessica didn't look offended. She didn't look defensive. She just looked honest. Because I was wrong, she said. Simple, clear. I didn't see what was right in front of me, she continued. And I don't want to make that mistake again. Something in my chest softened. Not completely, not all at once, but enough. All right, I said gently. A small, relieved smile crossed her face. Michael exhaled quietly, as if he had been holding his breath this entire time. Okay, he said. So, what's the plan? Clara turned slightly toward him. We keep it simple, she said. She doesn't need to prepare an entire program. She looked back at me. Just one piece. One piece, I echoed. She nodded. One piece that means something to you. My mind went blank, because suddenly the possibilities felt overwhelming. I don't know what that would be, I admitted. Clara didn't hesitate. Then don't choose yet, she said. Let it come to you. Jessica glanced at the piano. Should she start now? Clara smiled. Yes, and just like that, it began. The rest of the afternoon blurred into something I hadn't experienced in years. Practice. Not forced, not rigid, but real. I sat at the piano again, my hands still uncertain, still relearning what they once knew. But this time, I wasn't alone. Clara sat beside me at first, guiding gently when I faltered. Not correcting, not criticizing, just reminding. Don't rush, she would say softly. Let the notes breathe. And I listened, because I trusted her. The same way she had once trusted me. Jessica moved around the house quietly, bringing tea, adjusting the lighting, even opening the windows to let in the evening air. Small things, but they mattered. Michael stayed close sometimes, watching, sometimes stepping away, but always present. And something unexpected happened. The more I played, the less afraid I became. Not because I was suddenly confident, but because I stopped trying to prove something. To myself, to anyone. I just played. And little by little, the music began to feel like mine again. By evening, exhaustion had settled into my bones. But it wasn't the kind of exhaustion that drained you. It was the kind that came after something meaningful, something honest. I think that's enough for today, Clara said gently. I nodded. My fingers ached slightly, my shoulders tight. But my heart felt lighter than it had in years. What about tomorrow? I asked. Clara stood up, stretching slightly. Well, meet at the venue early, she said. You can get comfortable with the space. The venue. The word alone made my stomach tighten again. Is it big? I asked, trying to sound casual. Clara hesitated for just a second. Then she smiled. It's not about the size, she said. That wasn't an answer, and we both knew it. Jessica noticed too. How many people, she asked carefully. Clara glanced at her. Enough, she said. Jessica's eyes widened slightly. Oh. I let out a slow breath. Because now the fear was back. Not overwhelming, not paralyzing, but present. Real. What if I freeze? I asked quietly. Clara walked over and placed a gentle hand on mine. Then you pause, she said. I looked at her, and then she smiled. And then you continue. I shook my head slightly. It's not that simple. It is, she said. Her voice didn't waver. Because the music isn't going anywhere. A silence followed. And then Jessica spoke again. I'll be there, she said. I turned to her. In the audience, she added quickly. Supporting you. Michael nodded. Me too. Something warm spread through my chest. Because for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone. That night, sleep didn't come easily. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying everything that had happened. Clara, the piano, the music, the decision. Tomorrow. It felt unreal, like something that belonged to another version of my life. Not this one, not now. And yet, it was happening. I turned onto my side, closing my eyes, and for a moment, the fear crept back in. What if I fail? What if I forget everything? What if I can't do it? But then, another thought followed. Quieter, stronger. What if I can? I opened my eyes slowly, because that question, that possibility felt just as real. And maybe that was enough. The next morning arrived faster than I expected. Too fast. I stood in front of the mirror staring at my reflection. I looked the same. Older, yes. Tired maybe, but still me. And yet everything felt different. Jessica knocked gently on the door. Are you ready? She asked. I took a deep breath. No, but I nodded anyway. Yes, because sometimes you don't wait until you're ready. You step forward and hope you become ready along the way. The moment I stepped into the venue, I knew Clara had lied. Not out of cruelty, not out of deception, but out of kindness. Because when I saw it, the stage, the lights, the sheer size of the room stretching endlessly into rows upon rows of seats, my breath caught in my throat. This is, I whispered, unable to finish. Clara stood beside me calm as ever. Big, she offered gently. I let out a quiet, almost disbelieving laugh. That's one way to put it. It wasn't just big. It was overwhelming. The kind of place I had only ever seen in photographs. The kind of place where people didn't just play music. They proved something. And suddenly, every ounce of confidence I had built the day before began to crack. I can't do this, I said under my breath. The words came fast this time, sharp, immediate. Clara didn't react the way I expected. She didn't argue. She didn't rush to reassure me. She simply said, "Walk with me." Before I could protest, she gently guided me toward the stage. Each step felt heavier than the last. The floor beneath my feet seemed too quiet, too polished, like it didn't belong to someone like me. We reached the edge, and then she stepped onto the stage. Just like that. No hesitation, no fear. She turned back, extending her hand toward me. Come on. I stared at her hand, and for a moment I saw something else. Not Clara, but a little girl, standing in my doorway years ago, uncertain, afraid, waiting for permission. My chest tightened, because now the roles had reversed. I reached out and took her hand. The moment my foot touched the stage, something shifted. Not the fear. That was still there. Loud, persistent. But underneath it, there was something else. Familiar. The piano sat at the center of the stage, illuminated by soft light. Not my old upright. This one was different. Grand, elegant, perfect. And somehow that made it even more intimidating. "I've never played on something like this," I whispered. Clara smiled. "It's still a piano," she said. I shook my head slightly. "No, it's not the same." She tilted her head. "You're right," she said. I looked at her, surprised. "It's not the same piano," she continued, "but it's still your music." The words settled into me, slowly, carefully, and for a moment the fear softened. Just a little. "Sit," she said gently. I hesitated, but I did. The bench felt different, higher, smoother, unfamiliar. My hands hovered over the keys, and once again they trembled. The keys, and once again they trembled. "This is where it gets loud," Clara said quietly. I frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" She gestured toward the empty seats. "Right now, it's just you." A pause. "But later, this is where it gets loud," Clara said quietly. I frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" She gestured toward the empty seats. "Right now, it's just you." A pause. "But later it won't be." My chest tightened again, because I knew she was right, because soon this silence would be replaced by hundreds, maybe thousands of eyes, watching, waiting, expecting. "What if I forget everything?" I asked. Clara didn't hesitate. "Then you remember one note," she said. I looked at her. "And play that?" Her voice was steady, grounded. "And then the next." I swallowed. "And if I can't?" Expecting, "What if I forget everything?" I asked. Clara didn't hesitate. "Then you remember one note," she said. I looked at her. "And play that." Her voice was steady, grounded, and then the next. I swallowed. "And if I can't?" She stepped closer. "You can." The certainty in her voice didn't erase my fear, but it gave me something else, something to hold on to. "Try," she said. I took a slow breath, closed my eyes, and pressed a key. The sound echoed across the empty hall. Clear, strong, unforgiving. I flinched slightly. "That's normal," Clara said softly. "Everything feels bigger here." I nodded, because it did. Every sound, every movement, every doubt. But I pressed another key, then another, and slowly the space began to feel less like a threat and more like an extension. The notes carried. They filled the room. And for a brief moment, I forgot about the seats, the audience, the expectations. It was just me. And the music. Clara stepped back, watching. Not interfering, not guiding, just trusting. I opened my eyes. "This is terrifying," I admitted. She smiled. "I know." I let out a breath. "But it's also," I paused, searching for the word. "Alive." Clara nodded. "Exactly." We stayed there for a while, not rehearsing perfectly, not polishing anything, just experiencing the space, letting it settle, letting it become something I could stand in without falling apart. Later backstage, the reality hit harder. Voices, movement, people preparing. The quiet hum of something big about to begin. I stood near the wall, my hands clasped tightly together. Jessica approached me slowly. "You okay?" The reality hit harder. Voices, movement, people preparing. The quiet hum of something big about to begin. I stood near the wall, my hands clasped tightly together. Jessica approached me slowly. "You okay?" she asked. I shook my head honestly. "No." She nodded. "That makes sense." I glanced at her, surprised by her response. She gave a small smile. "If you weren't scared, I'd be worried." I let out a soft laugh. "That doesn't help." "Maybe not," she said. "But it means you care." A pause. "And that matters." Michael joined us. "You don't have to prove anything," he said. I looked at him. "I'm not trying to." "Good," he replied, "because you already did." His words settled into me, not removing the fear, but softening it. Clara appeared a moment later. "It's almost time," she said gently. My heart skipped. Too fast, too loud. "I'm not ready," I whispered. She stepped closer. "Yes, you are." I shook my head. "No, I'm—" She took my hands, firm, steady. "Sylvia." I stopped, looked at her. "Do you trust me?" The question was simple, but the answer? It wasn't. Not because I doubted her, but because trusting her meant stepping forward. Fully, completely, without holding back. And that was terrifying. But I nodded. "Yes." Her grip softened slightly. "Then come with me." The lights dimmed slightly. The sound of the audience settling into their seats filtered through the walls. A distant murmur. Growing, building, real. And as Clara led me toward the stage entrance, I felt it. Not confidence, not certainty, but something just as powerful. The decision. To step forward anyway. The moment we stepped onto the stage, the noise disappeared. Not because the audience was silent, but because everything inside me became louder. The lights were blinding, warmer than I expected, brighter than anything I had felt before. I couldn't see faces, only shadows, shapes, a presence. Hundreds of people sitting out there waiting. For Clara, for the music, and somehow now, for me. My heart pounded so hard, I was certain it could be heard through the entire hall. "I can't breathe," I whispered. Clara leaned closer without drawing attention. "Yes, you can," she said softly. I shook my head. "No, Sylvia," she interrupted gently. Her voice cut through the chaos in my mind. "Look at me." I turned slightly. Her face was calm, steady, familiar. "Don't look at them," she said. "Stay here, with her. Not out there, not in the darkness beyond the lights, just here." I nodded, barely, but it was enough. We walked toward the piano together. Every step felt unreal, like I was moving through something I hadn't fully agreed to, and yet I didn't stop. Clara sat first, graceful, confident, like she belonged there, because she did. Then she looked up at me and waited, the same way she had all those years ago, patient, trusting. I sat down beside her. The bench felt different again. Not like during rehearsal, not like yesterday. This time, it felt final, real. My hands rested in my lap, cold, slightly trembling. The silence stretched, and then applause. It rose suddenly warmly, filling the room. Not for me, for Clara. But somehow, it wrapped around both of us. I flinched slightly. She didn't. She simply bowed her head gently, then leaned toward me. "Ready," she whispered. "No." But I nodded anyway. Yes. The applause faded. The silence returned. But this time, it was heavier, expectant, alive. Clara lifted her hands and began. The first notes flowed effortlessly from her fingers. Confident, controlled, beautiful. The kind of music that didn't ask for attention. It commanded it. I sat beside her, frozen at first. Listening, trying to find where I belonged in something so perfect. And then, she glanced at me, just for a second. But it was enough. My cue, my breath caught. My hands lifted, hovered, and for a moment, everything inside me screamed to stop. Too many people, too much pressure, too much risk. What if I ruin this? What if I fail her? What if Sylvia, her voice, soft, steady, right beside me, not in front of me, not above me, with me. I closed my eyes, just for a second, and I remembered a small living room, a little girl with uncertain hands, looking at me the same way I was looking at her now, afraid, waiting, trusting. And I had said, no one gets to take music away from you. My fingers lowered, touched the keys, and I played. The first notes were quiet, barely there, but they were real, and that was enough. Clara adjusted instantly, without hesitation, without breaking the flow. She made space for me, not by stepping back, but by pulling me in. The music shifted, not dramatically, but gently, like a conversation. Her voice and mine, together. I opened my eyes. The fear was still there, but it wasn't in control anymore. The music was. My hands moved again. This time, more certain, not perfect, never perfect, but honest. And something incredible happened. The audience disappeared. Not physically, but emotionally. They were no longer something to fear. They were something to share with. The music grew, stronger, deeper. Every note carried something real, something lived. Grief, love, memory, hope, and Clara. Clara met me there, every step of the way, not leading, not following, walking beside me. The piece unfolded in a way I hadn't planned, hadn't rehearsed, but somehow it felt exactly right, because it wasn't about precision, it was about truth. And for the first time in years, I wasn't hiding mine. My fingers moved faster now, more freely, the hesitation gone, replaced by something else, something I hadn't felt since before everything fell apart. Freedom. Tears blurred my vision, but I didn't stop. I couldn't, because stopping now would mean losing this moment, and I wasn't ready to let it go. Not yet. Not again. The final section approached. I could feel it. Clara slowed slightly, giving space, trusting me, and I stepped into it, fully, completely. No hesitation, no fear, just me. The last notes rang out, clear, strong, unapologetic. And then, silence for a single heartbeat. And then, the room exploded. Applause, loud, unrelenting, overwhelming. I froze, because I hadn't expected it. Not like this. Not for me. Clara stood, pulled me gently with her. I stood beside her, my legs unsteady, my heart still racing. The applause didn't stop. If anything, it grew. People stood, one by one. Then all at once, a standing ovation. I looked out into the crowd, and this time I could see them. Faces, expressions, emotion. Some were smiling, some were crying. And suddenly I understood. It wasn't about being perfect. It was never about that. It was about being real. Clara leaned closer. "You did it," she whispered. I shook my head, tears streaming freely now. "We did it." She smiled, and for the first time, I didn't feel like someone who had lost everything. I felt like someone who had found something again. Something I thought was gone forever. Myself. The applause didn't fade right away. It stayed, lingering in the air like something alive, something that refused to be ignored. I stood there beside Clara, my chest rising and falling, my hands still trembling, not from fear anymore, but from everything I had just released, everything I had just reclaimed. And slowly, the noise softened. The clapping eased into something gentler, warmer, until finally it settled into silence again. But this silence was different. It wasn't empty. It was full of something unspoken, something shared. Clara squeezed my hand gently before stepping forward. She gave a small bow, graceful, practiced. Then she turned slightly toward me, and with a quiet, unmistakable gesture, she invited me forward, alone. My breath caught. For a moment, I hesitated, because this was something I hadn't prepared for. Playing beside her was one thing. Standing alone in front of all those people, that was something else entirely. But then I heard it. A single voice from the audience. "Bravo." And then another, and another. Encouragement. Not expectation, not pressure, just support. I stepped forward, slowly, carefully, and I bowed. The applause returned softer this time, but somehow even more meaningful. Because now, it felt personal. When I straightened, I found myself doing something I hadn't planned. I spoke. "My name is Sylvia Beaumont," I said, my voice slightly unsteady but clear enough to carry. The room quieted instantly. I haven't played in front of anyone in over 20 years. A ripple moved through the audience. Not shock, not judgment, understanding. I glanced back at Clara. She gave me a small nod. "Go on." I swallowed. "There was a time," I continued, "when music was the most important part of my life." My hands trembled slightly at my sides. And then life happened. A soft, knowing murmur moved through the crowd. "I lost people I loved," I said quietly. "I lost parts of myself I didn't think I could ever find again." My voice cracked slightly. But I didn't stop. Tonight, I didn't come here to prove anything. I looked out into the audience, at the faces, the eyes, the humanity in front of me. I came here because someone reminded me that it's never too late to come back to who you are. I turned slightly toward Clara. She stood behind the piano watching me not as a performer, not as a star, but as someone who understood. She was once my student, I said softly, and tonight she brought me back to life. The room fell completely still. And then, applause again. Not loud, not overwhelming, but deep, heartfelt, real. I stepped back, my eyes blurring again with tears. Clara met me halfway. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. "I know I said, but I needed to." She smiled, and for a moment we just stood there. Not as teacher and student, but as equals. Clara met me halfway. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. "I know I said, but I needed to." She smiled, and for a moment we just stood there. Not as teacher and student, but as equals. Backstage felt different this time. The tension was gone, replaced by something lighter, warmer. Jessica reached me first. Before I could say anything, she wrapped her arms around me, tightly. "I'm so proud of you," she said, her voice breaking. I froze for a second, not because I didn't understand, but because I wasn't used to it. Not from her, not like this. Slowly I returned the embrace. "Thank you," I whispered. When she pulled back, her eyes were full not just of emotion, but of something deeper. Respect. "I don't think I ever really knew you," she admitted. I gave a small, gentle smile. "That makes two of us." She laughed softly through her tears. "I'm sorry," she said again, "for everything." I shook my head. "You don't have to keep apologizing." "I do," she insisted quietly. "Because I need you to know I see you now." Those words settled into me. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. Michael stepped forward next. He didn't say anything at first. He just looked at me. And then he hugged me. Not quickly, not awkwardly, but fully. Like he meant it. "Mom," he said softly. I had no idea. I closed my eyes briefly. I didn't either. He pulled back, smiling slightly. "Well, I do now." Clara approached last. But when she did, the room seemed to quiet again. Not because of status, but because of presence. "You are incredible," she said simply. I shook my head. "I was honest." She smiled. "Exactly." We stood there for a moment, and then I said something I hadn't expected to say. "I think I want to keep playing." Her eyes lit up not with surprise, but with quiet joy. "I was hoping you'd say that." I let out a small breath. "I don't know what that looks like yet." "You don't have to," she said. "You just have to start." And for the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel like something to fear. It felt like something to explore. Weeks later, the piano in my living room looked the same. Old, worn, imperfect. But everything else had changed. The house felt different, lighter, alive. Music filled the rooms again, not constantly, not perfectly, but honestly. Jessica would sometimes sit nearby listening quietly, not interrupting, not judging, just present. Michael visited more often, not out of obligation, but because he wanted to. And Clara, Clara came by one afternoon, unannounced, just like she used to. She stood in the doorway, smiling. "Ready for your lesson?" she teased. I laughed. "I think I still have a few things to learn." She stepped inside. "Good," she said, "because so do I." And as I sat down at that same old piano, I realized something I never thought I would. It was never about the instrument. It was never about the years I lost. It was about the moment I chose to come back. And this time, I wasn't playing for the past. I was playing for myself. Sometimes, life doesn't take things away from us all at once. It happens quietly, slowly, in the spaces between responsibilities, grief, and time. We stop doing the things that once made us feel alive, not because we want to, but because we forget how to return to them. Sylvia's story is not just about music. It's about identity, about the parts of ourselves we believe are gone, when in reality, they are simply waiting for the right moment, the right courage, the right reminder. It's also about how easily we can misjudge others. Jessica thought she understood Sylvia. She saw only an old piano, a symbol of something outdated, but what she didn't see was the history, the love, and the silent strength behind it. And that's something we all do more often than we realize. We assume, we dismiss, we overlook, until something forces us to see differently. The truth is, it is never too late to rediscover who you are. It is never too late to start again. And sometimes, the person who helps you find your way back is someone you once helped without even realizing it. So, now I want to ask you, have you ever given up something you once loved? Do you think it's truly gone, or just waiting for you? If this story touched you, please take a moment to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. And if you believe in second chances, not just for others, but for yourself, don't forget to subscribe, because sometimes the most important comeback is your own.